Hey everybody, it's Mike from Get Your Rock Out, and I am here at Hard Rock Hell with the legendary Brian Tatler of Diamond Head. How are you doing, mate? You alright?
Doing okay, yeah. Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
You just got off stage about half an hour ago. It was a blistering performance. How do you think it went? How did you respond to the crowd's energy?
Yeah, thank you. I thought it was very good. Yeah, it's nice to play to a big crowd. I mean, there was upwards of probably 1,200 people in there. Yeah, it felt really good. We're allowed an hour set, so we just tailor it down and do all the good stuff and hope the crowd liked it. And it seemed to work. We were all pleased. Mm-hmm. It's quite stressful beforehand, because they make you get on and off really quick, and there's not a lot of change over time. But yeah, it was really good.
It was an interesting set because, a lot of emphasis on the older stuff. There was a couple of newer songs in there. The newer songs very much of the classic Diamond Head feel. It all ran together very smoothly.
Well, I suppose there's no point pulling too far away from what people like about Diamond Head anyway. If you're lucky enough to have a style or a sound, you should probably go with that. Because it's hard to find a sound in original style, and that first album, Light Into the Nations, definitely had a kind of style to it. So a lot of people want to hear those songs off the first album, so it does kind of lean on that first album.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that first album. I have it right here, and I also have the seminal Metallica classic, Kill 'Em All, as well. Now, it's universally acknowledged that you guys are a huge influence on Metallica, on Dave Mustaine as well, so hence Megadeth, pretty much in the formation of the thrash metal subgenre of metal. Right. The thing is, Kill 'Em All, being as it is the greatest new wave of British heavy metal tribute album ever, because there's all kinds of, there's early Saxon riffs are on there.
On there, isn't there? Yeah.
Early Maiden, early Saxon, but because the ethos of this album is very much in the Diamond Head mould, and there's so many things that they lift from you, riffs, certain rhythmic cadences, that kind of thing. What I want to know is, would you consider maybe Light Into the Nations as possibly the first thrash metal album?
Well, I suppose the term hadn't been coined back in 1980, had it? Thrash metal sort of came probably a couple of years later with that, LA scene and all that, San Francisco. But I mean, it's been said it's proto-thrash. But I didn't know at the time. I mean, we were just a band who tried to write good songs, and we were used to playing live. Most of those, if not all those songs, had been played live. So we learned fairly quickly that the fast songs went down best live. So we were not in the habit of doing ballads or big slow intros and things like that. We used to just hit them hard, really. We used to start with a fast song like Helpless and try and keep the energy level up. And if you drive to Sunderland and no one has your record, or you haven't even made a record, then you can either stand, you have an audience of people going, or you can win them over. And that was our goal, to kind of win the crowd, even though they didn't know any of the songs. So we do a lot of quick songs. I think there'd been some quick songs before Diamond Head, Judas Priest and Motorhead, and there's a few bands touched on some Adrenaline, Deep Purple. So we were probably in that tradition slightly, but trying to push the boundary even further by almost going as fast as we could, really. Probably playing out of our skins. I mean, some of the songs, Streets of Gold, was very difficult to play at the time. We'd almost collapse after playing something like that,
I mean, it's a very interesting placement as well, because it came out in 1980. This is when all the great new wave of British heavy metal albums came out. You had Ace of Spades, you had British Steel, Iron Maiden making their debut. But I just thought, because this one had such an influence on what is regarded as the first thrash album, I mean, people talk about Venom being a proto-thrash band and everything, but this preceded that by at least a year. Yeah. So it's just an interesting question of semantics, I guess.
I've never had that question fired at me before. It's an interesting question, yeah. We're slightly different from Venom in that they're a bit more aggressive, and there's less melody with their vocals, etc. But we probably came from slightly different schools. You know, we were influenced by your Zeppelins and Sabbaths and stuff. And there's always a great counter melody with those bands, and I think we were more coming from that angle. And we liked the idea of writing epics, you know, big long songs that had mood changes and dynamics, and it's really hard to do dynamics, but we managed to do it occasionally, and several of the songs are on that album that really work. So even now, I mean, how many years later, we're still playing them and they're still working.
Now, I was there at Nebworth 3 years ago when you opened for the Big Four.
Yeah.
Tell me about that experience. I mean, you looked like such a kid in a candy store. You were there, you had Nebworth right out in front of you. You got to go out with Diamond Head, you got to come out later with all the members of the assorted Big Four. Just tell me what that was like. I imagine it must have been like heaven.
Whatever heaven is. Yeah, it was great. I mean, it's kind of a nod, isn't it, towards Diamond Head to say, you know, respect. You're an important band. You might not have sold millions of records, but you're an influential band, and it's nice to be influential. I mean, it's an important part of music is people pushing it forward somewhere new and not just copying and doing more of the same. So we were probably, you know, I sometimes think it's like a stepping stone, isn't it, from bands like Sabbath towards Metallica. Diamond Head's took it faster and a bit sharp, a bit harder. You know, I love Black Sabbath, but you can't just do Black Sabbath again. I mean, some bands do, but I was not interested in just rehashing Black Sabbath. I wanted to at least give something back to this music that I love. I don't want to just take from it and repeat it. I want to do something of my own, you know.
Well, it's an interesting stance to have there, because I would consider Diamond Head as part of the new wave of British heavy metal to be that second step in a way. There was the origins of metal with Sabbath and bands like that. You guys were part of the second wave, really, hence the new wave. At the time, did you consider yourselves to be a counter to the punk movement that had happened, or did you just not factor in at all?
No, that didn't factor in. What I did like about punk is the speed and the adrenaline and the do-it-yourself and bringing it back down to the street. That's what I liked. I'd got fed up with bands like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and the big overblown bands of the time who started to do double, triple albums and would play, you know, Wembley Arena and things like that. Whereas suddenly, punk rock is guys who can barely play, making their own record, doing a gig up the road at the pub, and that's exactly where I was really. I mean, I could probably play a bit, but we couldn't. You know, I'm not Richie Blackmore. I couldn't have done what he did back in 1980. So I was all for get out there, get going, and don't spend 15 years in your bedroom trying to do what Richie Blackmore can do. I can play like Steve Jones right now, you know, let's do it, let's just go. And so it did give us a bit of a kick in the arse, punk rock did. It wasn't a us versus them at all. If anything, as I say, it was quite a kick. I can't think of another word for that.
Well, it is interesting because, like I said, into thrash metal, it was very much a new album and punk hybrid in a way. It was kind of...
Well, punk was before, wasn't it? Punk was 77, new wave and British heavy metal was 79, so punk was kind of done by then. They'd moved on to another, you know, the papers of the time had moved on to ska or New Romantics or all sorts of other bands were starting to get attention. A lot of the punk bands had gone by 79, 80. It was all over.
Now, nowadays, when you go out and you play Diamond Head shows, is the emphasis on, you know, we have our sound, as you said at the beginning of this interview, you know, let's give the people what they associate with Diamond Head? Or do you still find yourself, you know, creating and, you know, kind of taking things in a new direction in a way?
Not so much. I know it's a nice idea, and I think sure if we were signed to EMI and we could sell 1 million copies of anything we put out, we would probably be in the studio making albums all the time. But we're not. So the idea of creating creation is a lot of hard work, and I'd have to fund it, I'd have to find a studio engineer, blah blah blah. So it's quite expensive and time consuming and a little bit frustrating, the amount of work that it would take for us to write and record a new album. So even though I come up with ideas, I usually just keep them on the back burner and wait for an opportunity or a reason to work on them, really. And we've done 2 albums with Nick. We haven't done anything for a couple of years, but something might appear. I used to really get off on the creative side, but at the moment I'm quite enjoying just playing live and playing the old songs. And sometimes we bring in a song that we haven't played live before, or we play a song that we never played very often. Maybe we did it for a while, and we've literally got some songs that we haven't played for 25 years, so it's nice to bring them back out and polish them up a bit.
And I'm sure it must be appreciated when you bring out these old songs and someone in the crowd will just be, I know that song.
I've been asking you to play, that song for years. That's my favourite song.
Who on the current British metal scene have you seen who's impressive? I know you've toured with a couple of up-and-coming young artists, some of who are very much of the old school approach. They're bringing it kind of back round in a way. Who have you seen that has impressed you?
We did a gig the other night with a band called Evil Scarecrow from Nottingham, and I liked them. But a lot of times, I can't remember who the bands are. We'll meet them and I'll say, oh, great, blah, 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 blah. But I've forgotten the name by the next day and the next support band.
So Evil Scarecrow must have been impressive if they stuck in your head.
I enjoyed them, and we're doing a gig in Wakefield with them as well, I think. What else have I liked? I can't remember half the time what I've liked. I quite like Ghost. Is it Ghost BC?
Yes, I think now it's BC.
Yeah, I quite like that. I've listened to that album. But a lot of bands pass me by, really. I either don't get a chance to listen to them, or I've got an album by them and I haven't heard it yet, or I just can't remember the name.
Fair enough.
Just getting old, probably.
Well, we will have to wrap this up very unfortunately. Do you have a message into the camera for all our readers at Get Your Rock Out?
Well, my message then, in that case, is if you're in a band or you're thinking of starting a band, write songs. For what I have learnt is songs are number one. You can play the guitar, you can do this, you can do that, but if you haven't got good songs, I don't think you're going to do very well, really, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, you can go into the makeup and the costumes and all that, but ultimately the song is king. So I would concentrate every ounce you've got on writing songs. When Diamond did write this album, we'd written nearly 100 songs, and we picked those 7 songs, and we'd done them all live. We'd done over 50 gigs, so everything had been road tested, and we were just using the cream. And some of the songs we had left over we would use on the second album, the third album, EPs, B-sides. A lot of these songs get eaten up very quickly, so if you've only got 10 songs, you're going to run out of songs really quick. So I would write and write and write, and you learn by taping yourself and listening back and self-critique. But it's no good turning up with 3 songs. You've got to have lots and lots of good songs. That's my advice.
And I would add to that, I'm assuming that anyone who is watching this will own this album, but if you don't, do check it out, because this is a seminal piece of heavy metal history, not only for the influence it had on bands like Metallica, but just because as a standout metal album, there's 7 good songs on here. I've got the double one here. There's bonus tracks, 7 bonus tracks.
And the first single, Shoot Out the Lights, is on there, and Streets of Gold is on there, and things like that. And we did an EP as well called the Diamond Lights EP, and there's 3 tracks from that on there. So,
well, thank you very much for talking to me, man. I've been looking forward to talking to you for years, if I do say so myself, and it's very nice to have met you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll see you around, mate.
Yes.
Cheers.